I think a huge theme in my world right now is understanding what creative process is and like what that looks like and how much I notice my ego now because I'm experimenting with these different mediums of like creativity. And I thought because I'm so used to regular marketing and like business and like online entrepreneurship that I feel like my ego's not as much in it because I don't know, I just like, I trust my skills. But it's like when I'm trying something new and different, that's when it's like really awkward and like, you know, like then you actually notice your ego.
And then what about you, Shelby?
Yeah, I guess for me, I'm coming from a place of like the brain and the heart and focusing on the brain as the ego and trying to dial in and get into the eye of the storm and find that like heart-centered direction for everything. Because I think that not that everything is black and white, but there are kind of, you can go into that ego mind or you can go into that heart space and what it feels like to really just like surrender into that. So that's where I'm at.
And what do you think are your biggest blocks or things that keep you from that place?
I think it could be challenging to actually slow down enough and get out of your own way to be able to listen to your heart and not what you think, like, you know, not putting any framing on that, just like letting it actually come out and listen.
Without judgment.
Without judgment, exactly. Because it could come up and you could be like, ooh, that's new. Not what I expected to feel. And then you're like, I don't like that.
I feel like I'm such a hype woman for everyone else in my life. And then it's like, when I'm trying something new, I'm like, it's like so critical. I'm like, you would never talk to someone else that way, but like, why is it like that? And that to me is ego, like 100%. Like it's not heart-centered.
Yeah.
But yeah.
What are the certain behaviors or traits that you have that you're like working on?
Oh God.
People pleasing.
Is that your biggest one?
That is my biggest one right now. Because I think that it can be really deceiving when you're like, I'm doing this for everybody. Like I'm trying to like be love for everybody and help everybody else have a better experience. Oftentimes at the cost of your own peace. And you don't see that until it's played out too far sometimes. So getting ahead of that and again, like tapping into like, what does my heart, what does my inner self like really want in this moment? And how can I make that work to, I don't know, find synergy?
What's something you're working on right now, Billy?
I'm trying to find my best form of manifestation. Like I'm always testing how much I can manifest or what I want to manifest. Like I like testing my own limits, like thinking what I can believe in or not. Like either money, certain things to do or a career. Like ever since kind of like writing down and visualizing the relationship I want and then it like kind of coming true, I'm just like, if I can do that, I can probably do anything. And it's just my own like ego or programming that I feel keeps me from that. Well, especially when I hear other people, when I share what I'm trying to manifest and they hear like their own beliefs about it, that's what I'm trying to like totally ignore and just like focus on what, like my inner being wants and like what brings it joy. So my thing is always whenever I have a huge goal or manifestation, I always hear the reasons why I don't have it. And sometimes I get distracted or I call like lost in thinking about it rather than just being or doing it. So I sometimes just get too caught up in like thinking, oh, how can I do this or do that when I just have to just do it and not know like the outcome and just believe that whatever it is I'm doing is going there.
I think that's super relatable, especially if do you identify as someone who has like perfectionist tendencies?
I used to, but now I don't care at all.
And I used to be like so horrible about that. Like I couldn't put anything out or do anything creative or like even just anything unless it was this like supreme perfect quality. And once you live in that space for such a long time, I think that's when you really get to know what your ego really is. Because to me, people who are like that, or in my experience anyways, it's like, it's actually just like more of a kind of showcasing how like insecure you actually are, and like how really that's like kind of your soul. It's like a cry for help. It's like a lower self-esteem kind of situation. And so thinking that like you need to be perfect to be loved, which is, I think, normal. Like, I feel like if you are an ambitious person and you're like, we have all these societal things we have to achieve, that I think I don't know. I feel like a lot of people have shared that with me as well, but that's what I fight. It's still there. I totally now am like so much more open and like don't care as much, but when it comes to work, I think that's where that comes into play. But when I'm having a good time and I'm like, there's nothing at stake, it's like, I don't give a shit, like whatever.
And how do you tap into that? So like to get rid of the paralysis by analysis and just like trust that first draft, trust that first intuition of,
I was just like, it's not that serious. Like, I mean, I was literally like, I was just telling Madeline, like I went to watch this movie about black holes at the planetarium. And it just like, even just realizing how like, we're so small, like nothing really matters. Like we give our lives and every single thing we do meaning. And so I think for me, it's like about zooming out. And this is like brand new, like for me, for sure. Like, especially with work stuff, like it's not that serious, you know, it's not that deep, and like making it more fun, which is like why I always joke that Billy's the jester. Like that's your archetype, because it's like, you're already there for so much of it and you realize that. And I think at first that makes people super uncomfortable, but then they realize like, no, like we can have fun. Like it's okay.
And still do your job. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Because I think just from my own experience being like an artist or like a creator, that I always know that that's like thinking always gets in the way. Like critiquing myself or judging whatever I put out, or in a way like people pleasing. Like you want to put stuff out that people look at, but pardon me, I just don't use like my work to do that. It's more like, this is something I wanted to create out of nothing. So I'm just going to share it and not worry about anything else. Because I think whenever I have like a thought when I'm doing something and it's like judging or it feels limited, I do it anyway. Cause I'm like, that's what I'm supposed to do.
Yep.
Like I kind of trick myself in that way.
Yeah.
And then that's when I can notice it in other people when they're doing that and just be like, just put it out there. Like it doesn't have to be what your ego thinks it has to be. It just has to, you have to fully align with it and just put it out there.
Yeah.
You know,
if you're following your passion, everything else will just follow.
Yeah. Cause I always use examples like people that are doing so well from like just jump roping, or doing well from like the smallest things that you're like, how can you be successful at that? Like just focusing on one thing, and they already are. So like, I like using the, not the typical career or job to like motivate and inspire me.
Well, and this makes me think of it's so funny like how simple that really is, but it's like so hard to like do that when we're just like very much so shown like such a different path to success. Like it has to be XYZ and it has to be this super linear route, when in reality, that's not how it works. And most successful people will tell you it's never been a linear route. They never followed what anybody was expecting of them. They usually pissed off a ton of people, you know, on the way, because they decided to like stand in their truth in their own sense. But I listened to this podcast by Brendan Bouchard, I think his name is, recently. And it was basically about how like no one knows you. Like, like, why are you so worried about putting yourself out on Instagram or like starting a business account? It's like, what are you worried about the 40 people at your office? Like, who gives a shit? Like, literally the world is so big. And like, especially when you're first starting out, like no one knows you. Like, and so for me, I think that's what I judge myself. The internet kind of scares me, because I'm like, there's so many trolls, and like, you know, you're worried about offending certain people by saying, you know, certain things. And it's like, but nobody knows you. Like you're not like, I mean, there's like all these little microcosms, like in all different topics, different, you know, industries or whatever. And it's like, it's not that deep basically.
And everybody's also caught up in their own shit.
Totally. Everyone's just thinking about themselves.
Like, I'm not going to flatter myself by thinking that if I post something really cringy on TikTok, that somebody a week later is still like, God, Shelby is so weird. I mean, maybe, but who cares really? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. At the end of the day, I'm the one that's got to live with myself and my thoughts. Mm-hmm. That's fair.
Yeah. And then what would you say is your biggest fear then that holds you back from living more?
I think it's a fear of being seen. Totally.
Like 100% see?
Yeah, just being seen in general. That's why that podcast resonated with me so much, because it made me like audibly, like I was like cracking up because it's so true. I think, I think of most people want to do something that makes a difference or like helps other people or like have gone through experiences and they want to share that in some way and help, through that transformation or whatever, but are just afraid of like being seen. It's like, what if I'm not qualified enough? That's a huge thing for me is like, I'm not a therapist, so I can't talk about how I went through the super hard thing. And I don't want to it's like I get super neurotic about it. And then in reality, it's like sharing stories is kind of like how people heal in a lot of ways. So I don't know. That's probably it for me. Just being seen.
Yeah.
What about you, Shelby?
I think similarly, it's being judged and people not seeing me the way that, oh, this sounds weird. I don't know. Like them seeing me incorrectly. If I am portrayed in a different light than I would have liked to be because of their own experiences and the way that they choose to view it.
It's like controlling other people's perception of you.
Yeah. Yeah. Like the judgment is weird and like the unknown, I think that's what's really scary. It's like, I don't really know how people will receive this based on their life experiences.
Right.
But standing in my truth is like, you have to remind yourself of that, but it is hard.
For sure.
Especially in the moment of it.
No, totally. Because everyone experiences those same fears and everything like that. And I think the thing I do when I get a little worried or afraid of something, I always know that whatever I'm afraid of, it's like something that I'm not doing for myself. Yeah. Like, my thing I used to be afraid of is like, I can't be happy unless people around me are happy. That used to like control my life a lot of times. Like if I'm
probably left you feeling disappointed often.
Well, yeah, I mean, a lot of it came from just like, having experience of like my family not in a good place. So that means like, I can't be in a good place. But that was when I was like much more victimized by everything. And so now when I look back, I realize like all the stuff that I was afraid of, it was like, I had asked myself like, why am I afraid of being happy? Yeah. Why is it other people's job to be happy? And then once I got over that, I realized that like, they're just a reflection of my psyche, because then when I was happy.
I knew you were going to go that way. And I love that because it's been so relevant for me lately.
And plus like, once you live that way, there's nothing to be afraid of. Because you have so much more control. I
think it's super helpful for me to come back to the exercise of like, everyone in my reality is like this fragment of something that's within me, or like, especially people that like, trigger me, or like, I find like, I don't understand why they would say or do X, Y, Z. And like coming back to the practice of like, oh, it's probably because there's a part of myself that I've used to relate to or do that, and I've overcome or healed that. So it's like you're kind of like, I healed that, so like why can't you heal that? But that's like not, it's like trying to control someone else's.
Yeah, it's almost like whatever you're saying to someone, you're actually saying to yourself.
Exactly. 100%.
That's what makes me change things.
Totally.
What's like the funniest thing you've manifested or experienced lately?
The funniest thing?
Yeah, or just something like you're kind of like surprised at yourself for, or something like that, Like for me, trying to manifest this podcast, I tried to do everything just with my imagination, then doing work for it. Like I imagine how I would set up the lights, how many mics I need, like little things like that. And then everything just seamlessly showed up. Totally. Because I was already like, just had it in my mind. So there's things like that I'm like, oh, I don't have to do so much now. Like, so that's what I'm having a lot of fun with. Was just like,
right. Cause you could just show up and play.
Yeah. I think without getting into specifics for myself, when you put no pressure on it and you're just like, what if this were to happen, and no stock, just kind of like playfully thinking about what could be. It's interesting to see what comes out of that.
Yeah. I am trying so hard to tap into that energy more because I feel like I'm just so, when I like, anytime I'm doing something with work or like a project, I like turn into such an annoying, serious person. Like, how can I make sure I like become the best at this or like, you know, push myself to some extreme? And it's like
Capricorn.
I know. Sometimes astrology, yes, maybe that'll point to that. But totally. I'm trying to think of something funny though. I think the people in the last year, like that I've been in my life that have been extremely triggering, I think that's hilarious because in my mind, like as I've like moved through a lot of like, you know, it could be work situations or family members or just like ridiculous random people like on the street where I'm like, what the fuck? Like, why did this happen? I feel like I'm finally at a place where I realize like there's some type of contract I had to where like I had to go through that and it like allowed me to grow. And maybe this is just a coping mechanism, but like I view them as like being on the other side, you know, of like, or I'm like the astral or something, and them being my best friend actually. And they came in to play this like evil character to like get me out of my comfort zone and like also to like realize like what still needs to be healed within myself. So I don't think it's like, I think that's funny now that I'm like recognizing that and I'm like past it, but I don't know. Like, is there an example that you have that's like something really funny?
Oh, a funny manifestation? Yeah, I randomly got an airdropped or a text with like tons of cash in a photo. Like, what the hell does that mean?
It's coming.
You know, so part of me is like, just observing and was like shocked, but also like cool, you know?
Yeah.
So, and I can't explain that, but I'm also like, love the visual of it.
I think too, what's super fun about getting in that space is like, then you really realize when you start manifesting random things or funny things like that, you kind of realize like how important the letting go part is. Like, and realizing like, if it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, it doesn't. And it's like not meant for me, but like, that does seem like that would be really cool to do or whatever. And then when it does come, you're like, okay, cool. It was meant for me. And so I think it just like that's probably how I can make it more playful rather than being like, all right, I need to be a millionaire by 35 and I need to have X, Y, and Z like all lined up. And, but yeah, I don't know. I think though too, when you start thinking about that, about how, cause some people manifest things in their life all the time unconsciously. And to me,
we're all doing that.
That is, but like the more like even seeing someone who doesn't know what manifestation or like law of attraction or any of that, like anything in that, I guess, topic or whatever. And they're like, why does this keep happening to me? And you're like on the outside watching like, oh man, like you're doing like you're calling it in by the different behaviors or whatever and whatnot. For an easy example is like when I think Dan and I were going out to like do errands or something. And he was like in a terrible mood, like something bad happened. And then it was like, people are cutting him off on the freeway, like insane people at the grocery store. I'm like, I'm sorry, but like, maybe there's something going on, but like, I'm pretty sure like you just have this energy coming out of you. And that's why. So then it gets to a point where we will just laugh because it's just like, okay, like nothing you can do about this at this point.
Yeah. And look for it, you'll find it.
What do you think is something you want to accomplish like this year or moving forward right now?
I think kind of jumping off of what you were saying of everybody kind of being a prism, you know, I think of it as everybody's a mirror to yourself. Like every lesson, every trigger, every person in your life, even the fear that comes up is trying to tell you something. So what is reflecting back and what can you then transmute to reflect out? Like, what are you reflecting? Kind of like, so like fully embodying that, like clearly I have this tattoo. I've been working on that lesson for a long time. And I have that there as a reminder of like, everything's a mirror and what are you choosing to reflect? So that's.
Yeah, I think that's why when I'm in a bitch ass mood, I just like stay in my apartment. I'm like, I don't want, this is like, I need to like ground this energy and like get myself together. Cause like, I think that's just like, that's kind of the nature of reality. It's just immediately, and then the more you become conscious of it though, you like, you know, like I'm going into this with this, like, I feel really weird, whatever. And it's like, I don't know. I think that's why meditation and like understanding practice whatever that practice might be, to ground yourself or like get in alignment or like feel good is so important because I think my big goal for this year is honestly what we're talking about is like getting out of that serious frame and like viewing work as play. Like every single day is an opportunity to play. Like even if it's like boring, like 9 to 5 stuff, like there's still so many moments and interactions that you can make playful and like recognize like that it's not that serious. And for me, when I do that, then I'm like performing the best. I'm presenting the best. Like it's like you take the stakes away. And so I think my big goal for this year is like actually like really embodying that like at least 80% of the time. Cause maybe it's not realistic to be that way 100% of the time, but I feel like I'm so far in that other of like living in your mind. And I don't know, I think like actually recently I had a therapist tell me this, therapy, that when you grow up in situations that are chaotic or whatever, like that oftentimes puts you feel safer in your mind. Like when you're having a strategy or you could think things through or you have a plan or like whatever that is. And I think that's like, I think it's actually pretty common when I share that with people. They're like, yeah, like that's why I stay in my head so much. Cause it's like, it's safe knowing like I have control. But once you get a place where you realize it's just a program and that's just like, it was one strategy. It's not the only strategy to like live. Then that's when the good stuff happens for me anyways. But
it served you for a time.
Totally.
And we can learn from it.
Well, and I think it's why I'm good at business. Cause like, I mean, it's like a skill set I transferred into a lot of different things, but then it's like, again, it's not black and white thinking. And that's also something I've recently really tried to get away from too.
This just also makes me think of, I think something that we're all really good at is understanding that like failure is not a bad thing. Totally. Like failure means that you tried. Failure teaches you something one way or another. And it shows that you got out of that like, oh, I'm overthinking this. Oh, I just did it. So yeah, I think we're all pretty good at that.
I agree because I also think that like pain is your biggest support system or like the catalyst to whatever it is you want.
We love pain.
And I feel like the more pain you go through, the more you have control of your ego. Like that's why I love Hot Ones because it's like seeing people deal with pain shows who you really are. And I think the people that handle it in whatever form they do, either like dramatically or very like controlled, I think that is the spiritual journey. Like, how do you deal with your own pain?
I want to go get a tattoo with you. I want to see what happens.
This one, I was like, can you do here? And they're like, it'd be so painful. I'm like, do it anyway. And they're like, no, it's going to kill you. And I was like, fine.
I love it.
But for me, that was the one thing I know kept me from all the things I wanted, was being afraid of failing and the pain of that. But then I realized, like, you guys know I love movies. So I take that concept into my life. And I think prior to now, I was like an amateur filmmaker creating reality without believing in myself or knowing that I was doing it. So I was just creating really bad films, really bad reality. And I think everyone is like that until you get to a point where you have to face your pain. And then if you can overcome that or like just feel it, then you will get everything that you kind of want. But I think that's what holds people back, is that fear of their letting go of your ego. And that's like what the pain's from.
It's like getting sore from a workout when I kick your ass in a workout.
Yeah. And
like
I'm just
your
like,
muscles, your organs, like everything that endures pain, we can biologically look at, gets stronger over time. It develops resilience. And so our spirit is no different. Our psyche is no different.
Yeah. And it's just so hard that people, when they have pain, they either like panic, they want to run away or like leave. But most of the time I'm just like, just sit with it. Yeah. Like that's the hardest thing for most people.
I mean, what would you say before kind of getting onto the spiritual journey? What was the way that you dealt with pain?
Let's see, what would be the scariest thing? Well, the one thing I realized I wanted to do more than anything was to just manifest. Like, how do I do that the most purest, most powerful way? So I realized that like I can't preach it unless I practice it. So I had to test myself. So the most painful thing I've ever had to do was, I basically was in a place where it's like, whatever I wanted to manifest, I can't listen to my head at all. So there's times where I'd be it feels like a crucifixion where it's literally, I'm laying in my sofa hearing all these reasons why something is going to happen or what's the worst thing could happen. And I just had to sit with that pain and just like, it's not real. It's not real. Like nothing is going to ever be bad, or, you know, like you have that internal fight. And then that was like the most anxiety I've ever had, the most like fear I've ever experienced, because I really wanted to learn what it's like to really be free of your ego. Like that's what I've read is the human spiritual journey, and what's represented in, to me, in symbolism in all movies, you know, like every villain is that main character's ego. And so I use movies to like be a little path or an example for me. And I just realized that like, whenever you're trying to manifest or change your life, you have to die. That other part of you has to die.
Yes.
And so like for me, it was being like, no matter where I'm at or what happens, I'm focusing on what I want, and whatever my mind or thoughts say, I have learned to just completely like throw them away.
That makes me think of this quote I read recently. It was, your ego will burn down your entire life for the sake of being right.
Oof.
Yeah. And that's like everyone's problem.
Yeah.
Like everyone. Because when I love, you know, I love Kitchen Nightmares, and it's like the same concept in a micro form. But in order to get people out of your, in order to get people to get out of your ego, I don't think people realize how much energy and how much spirit you have to deal with people that are afraid of change. Like that's why I respect him so much, because he has no filter, tells you the truth, and like is only there to support you, even though you don't want to hear it.
Yep.
But in the end, it's like he supports he hears your vision, where you want to go, where you're at, makes you face all the reasons you're not there. And like some people don't want that, but that's like what the work.
That reality check is painful.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would say before, I've always been super drawn to esoteric and like a more unorthodox spiritual journey. But I don't think I became conscious of the way that I dealt with pain or whatever until honestly, like the last like 5 or 6 years, definitely being someone who's just like, would rather just run away from it. And I think like once you realize the way that you cope when different types of adversity or stuff that's like really, you know, obviously I'm not running away from daily struggles, but like when bigger things would hain, I'd find myself being like, all right, gotta bounce, like gotta get out of this town, can't deal with this anymore. And there's certain, obviously there's gifts and everything, but I think when you realize that this cycle will not stop repeating until you sit in it and until you allow the pain to shape you into the next version of yourself, I think that to me is like the biggest wake up call. Is like, I have to just go through this bullshit. Like I have to just feel this. I have to be super uncomfortable. Maybe my goal for this year actually is just being more cringe. Cause all of that's like what I'm like, oh, I don't want to do that. That's cringy. I don't want to put myself out there. That's cringy. Like, but that on the other side is always like so much more fun. And it's like, who cares? Yeah. But for me, sitting in it, I think and being still is actually 100 times harder than any other. I don't know what the other options you were saying, but
I think I can relate to that. And an important differentiation I had to make was I started to identify as like just pain. Like, I'm a little emo kid. Everything is pain. Life is pain. And just like identifying with that and almost like accepting it too much. Like I thought that I was sitting with it. I thought that I was like working through it, but instead I was like addicted to it, I think. Like,
oh, for sure. Totally. Well, I think drama, it's like how we crack up all the time. Like there's definitely so many people that like you see that like are unconsciously addicted to drama and like unconsciously addicted to like the chaos in their lives. And I think also too, everything goes back to how like your childhood and like that initial programming of your mind and like how you perceive the world. It's like if you were in a chaotic, upbringing or whatever, it's like you don't realize that you create chaos to feel normal, or to feel like that, and granted, I mean, I feel like I not that my home life was ever that crazy, but it was definitely just, there was always so many moving parts and there were so many different things going on that I didn't know how to be still. Like I didn't know that like healthy meant sometimes being bored. And like, you know, like, cause I'm just like, then you get to that place where it's like, are you realizing like, it's not that you're bored. It's just like, there's no conflict around you. like
this is normal.
It's like your ego's like, I'm bored. I need some stimulation.
Then that's when it clicks for me is like, I'm like, oh, that's just my ego. Like you just don't want to do the work. Like, or if it's like the epitome of procrastination. That's something I'm super, like intentionally working through right now because it's gotten to the point where it's like, yes, it's always been there, but it's also like, it is so silly when you unpack it. Yeah. Like at the end of the day, it's like literally a task of 3 things. Like, please stop cleaning your house. Please stop going to get groceries. Please stop doing like every other thing. Just actually put your mind aside and like literally just do it and get it done.
Yeah. I think like your inner peace and having joy in your life is like the most valuable thing for me. Like, that's why if I meet anyone that like is not reflecting that, I'm kind of like, you got some work to do. You're still like an amateur filmmaker. And I don't want to like be influenced by like that. Yeah. And I know sometimes judgment,
but like,
it's just, I mean, for me, it's like, that's so important to me. Yeah. And it's like, no matter where anyone else is at, it's more like, I'm responsible for my life. So like, I have to make choices that, not benefit me, but are like, make me happy, I guess you could say.
Well, I love you said I'm responsible for my life because I think it was a podcast, I can't remember, but talking about how it's the most terrifying thing, knowing that like your life and every single thing in your life is your full responsibility, but also the most liberating at the same time. It's like a constant dichotomy, but like but you can't live on the fence. Yeah. Like and I feel like that's something that I have always been very good at. I'm like, oh, I don't want to commit. I don't want to commit. You know, like I have my foot in both worlds. Like that's something I've always been that way until probably the last like couple years where it's like, no, like you have to go full send. And that's, I think, something you and I talk about a lot is like, Christina, like just commit to the decision.
What's holding you back?
Literally just do it. Like, and usually when you have that energy behind whatever it is, whatever big decision you're making, that is when you see like the universe at play. Because it's like, okay, that's the direction you're going. Got it. Here's the support. And I feel like, I don't know. I think that's just like so scary though. It's like just taking a leap of faith. And also knowing like if you fail 9 times out of 10, you're not going to die.
Yeah. Well, and it's like the same concept. If you're a film director and you can't decide a choice in a film set, it affects your whole movie. Yeah. So I always think of
people feel
like
that energy. Yeah. They feel that.
Yeah.
So I always think like whenever I'm there, I'm like, oh, I'm like failing to do my job or failing to believe in myself enough to like make a decision. Cause I'm like, I don't want to live or create like a really shitty movie that no one wants to see. Yeah. Like I want to, so whenever I think of a relationship or a new experience, I think of it like a movie. Like, okay, I have to create this and I've never done it before. What skills can I like transfer from like a film to my life? And it really helps me make like practical steps instead of just living in my head about it. Yeah. Cause I'm like, I have to do something in order to make it happen instead of just like dream or think about it. So that's why I think it's really fun to be in a place where you're like, you have to commit and you're like wishy-washy, but then instead of staying in that place and like going back and forth, I'm always like, okay, what kind of movie would it make if I kept doing that? Yeah. Or if I made this choice compared to that choice? Like you just end up not believing in anything in yourself at all. And then you make something where you're kind of like, oh, I regret
it's like it's like watered down almost. Like when you live in that in-between space, like and again, always speaking for myself, but like when I am like trying to live in both worlds of like whatever decision I'm trying to make, then the output in both of those worlds is so watered down. And then you start getting like not negative feedback, but it's almost kind of like everyone can feel your energy behind that. Like when you're fully present in a situation or in a work project or a creative endeavor, like people feel it.
Energy responds.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Totally. But I was actually thinking, I need to give you this book that I got from it was like this like thrift store, but it's called Art and Fear. And it's like these artists that like wrote it. It's a very small book, but it's like brutal, like brutally honest. It's like funny. And one of the little portions of the book that always sticks out to me is about how this art teacher gave their students a project where it said whoever makes the most perfect like pottery like pot like will win the prize, or like will get an A in the class. And 50% of the class has to spend they can only make one pot and it has to be perfect. But then the other 50% of the class, they can do it as many times as they want until they deem, like the pot that they turn in is like, perfect in their mind. And always that group ended up coming up with way better results and way better things because they just sucked enough times to actually get the experience to learn from it. And it's just like, I crack up at that. I know it's such a simple like analogy, but I am so the group that's like, okay, I've got like this one pot, like I have to wait for it to be perfect, and I have only this one opportunity, when it's like, that's not how you get good at things.
Yep.
Like that's not how you expand. Like you have to go through being a weirdo, being awkward, and being like, not good.
That makes me think of another quote, and it's, in terms of success, and it's everybody always wants to congratulate you or somebody when they get pregnant, but they don't know how many times they got fucked.
Oh my God.
It's a good one. It's a good one.
Oh my God. Yes.
Do you want to follow up with that? I thought you were waiting to say something. I was like, is there another?
No, like really though, you congratulate somebody when they accomplish something, but you do not know how many times they had to go through it.
Well, and it's all, like and that's kind of what I was talking about. The theme in my life clearly right now is like understanding artistic process and like creative process, and like how to like get out of yourself to like let the art flow through, or like whatever that is. But yeah, I don't know. I think everybody thinks it's instant success and overnight celebrity status because of social media. And of course, no one's documenting you like eating shit like on the way to your journey, basically.